everyone, and welcome to The Date is Fuzzy. I'm your host, Tony Binge, and welcome to episode 2 of The Date is Fuzzy, the story of the life and times of Tony Binge. And last week we kind of hit on a few subjects. This week's going to be no different. I thought this week we'll go way back in time, like when I was a kid. Remember those summers when, you either go to your grandparents' house or they would come to your house? In my case, my grandmother would come to our house. Now, my grandmother was one of them old country bumpkin ladies. She liked to dip her square snuff, but she always liked to tell us kids what to do. Even if our parents were home, she'd still try to tell us what to do. And of course, as a young kid, we looked at her like, oh, she's just some crazy old granny. And, but one day we realized that our crazy old granny was terrified of snakes. I'm talking completely terrified to the point of passing out. So this had to be somewhere around 1986, 1987, somewhere in that time frame. But any event, as a lot of you know and heard from the last week's show, I was a huge wrestling fan. Always have been, probably always will be. But when I was about 10, 12 years old, I had my dad or someone had got me this Jake the Snake rubber snake that went in a little green bag. So anyway, our parents were at work and Grandma was home taking care of us kids, me and my crazy cousins, and the next door neighbor kids would come over too. But man, I remember that summer was probably one of the craziest summers ever as a child. Like I said, Grandma had came down to spend the summer with us, so she was going to babysit us kids, and we were going to try to give Grandma a hard time. That's what we do. Now, one thing that you will learn about me as this podcast progresses is I was always the kid that had that crappy idea that I knew we shouldn't be doing, but I didn't have the guts to do it. So I'd put my cousins up to do it. I'd say, hey, do this, you do that, and I'd sit back and laugh. Well, so anyway, my grandmother, she was sitting in the recliner and she was crocheting. That's what grandmothers do. She was dipping her square snuff, listening to something on the radio, and crocheting. So at the time, my 3 cousins, were living with me and my parents. And so at this time, I probably would have been somewhere around 11 or 12. My cousin Mark would have been 10. My cousin Tanya probably somewhere around 7 or 8. And John would have been like 4 or 5. So anyway, here we go. It's summertime and our parents are working. Like I said, my dad, was, he worked on houses and stuff like that. So he was gone. He was long gone. Now you got to remember, this is before cell phones, pagers. When Dad was gone, he was gone, and he didn't know what was going on until he came back home. So anyway, he was gone and he was going to work. Well, my mother and my aunt were working next door at this little factory that was like 2 doors down from our house. So it wasn't odd for us to walk over there and, get money from Mom or my aunt to go down to the corner store to get our favorite candy or ice cream. And I'll touch base more about our favorite store as this podcast progresses over the next few weeks. But in any event, so anyway, we are out there playing, me and my cousin, and we got I got my DDT him on our little makeshift wrestling ring that we built in the backyard. Put the snake on him like Jake Roberts did. 1, 2, 3, put the snake on him. I won the match or whatever. So I told my cousin Mark, I said, hey, we should take that snake in there and sit on Grandma's lap and see what she does. Now, this snake was probably it was rubber, and it looked like it's supposed to look like a python, but it looked more like a copperhead. Now that I think about it and look back in time, but anyway, this snake was probably about 3 or 4 feet long, and it was rubber, had a tongue sticking out, and like I said, it came in this little green bag that said Jake the Snake. If you look this thing up on eBay, I'm sure you'll still see them on there for sale. But anyway, and I may have to pick up one after the show. But anyway, I tell my cousin Mark, I say, hey, let's go in the house and put it on Grandma's lap and see what she does. He said, okay, that's a good idea. And he goes, are you going to do it? I said, no, you are. You do it. You go do it. He's like, okay. So here we go. We walk in there. I'm walking behind him because I want to see Grandma's face. So next thing I know, he comes in and says, hey, Granny, I found this out in the yard. And he lays this snake on her lap. Well, she screams and says, Lord have mercy. And before she could say Jesus, she falls flat of her face on the floor. And I'm like, what just happened? And my cousin Tanya's like, I'm going to go tell Mom that y'all killed Granny. So off she runs down. And we're like, no, don't go telling us. We'll get in trouble for killing Grandma. Now we're sitting here, little kids thinking we just killed her grandma. I guess me and my cousin are trying now to figure out how we're going to get rid of the body. I don't know what we were thinking. We kind of froze, but it was too late. She was long gone. She went down and told my mom, hey, Tony and Mark just killed Granny. They said, what? What do you mean killed Granny? Well, they put a snake on her and she died. So anyway, everyone comes, literally the whole factory empties out. They all come up there to see that we had just killed our grandma. My mom and my aunt are freaking out. And then, of course, they get my grandma to wake up, and she's looking around and she's terrified. And my mom goes, what in the world just happened? And she said, Mark and Tony's got a copperhead. And my mom says, no, they don't have a real snake. It's a toy snake. She goes, no. It's a copperhead. Where's it at? And she's looking all over the house for it. And then my mom goes, you talking about this one? And she fainted again. And I'll tell you now, I think about it, I laugh, but at the time, man, I was terrified. Not because I killed my grandma, but because I knew when Dad came home, I was going to get a spanking for killing Grandma. Even though I didn't really kill Grandma, we just gave Grandma a scare. But I didn't know that my grandmother was so terrified of snakes. Had no clue. Now, they always say tables get turned on you. Well, like I said, my grandmother was this old country woman. My grandfather, he was a chicken farmer, and he had tons of chickens at his house. Well, fast forward 5 more years, I'm probably 14 or 15, and we go every summer around the 4th of July. We always went to my grandparents' house to visit, and we'd stay there a couple of days. Sometimes me and my parents would go stay in a hotel and not stay at my grandparents' house, and sometimes we'd stay at my grandparents' house. It just really depended upon. I'm really not sure what it depended on. I was a kid. I don't know. I was just, sometimes we stayed at grandma's house. Sometimes we went to a hotel. Who knows? But anyway, this particular summer, we pull up, and now I'm probably 14 or 15. Got the mullet growing, and I'm going to be a famous wrestler and rock star. Okay. So anyway, we pull up in the house, and my uncle says, hey, Tone, can you come give me a hand? I need to bring Grandma's dresser outside. And I'm like, okay. So I go in the house, and he goes, now you got to be really careful as you carry it out. And I'm like, why do I got to be careful? Well, don't want to scar up the walls. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So me and my uncle, we start carrying out this dresser, and as soon as I get to the front porch, he goes, no, let's go to the yard. I'm like, going to the yard? Did she sell this thing? Is she throwing it away? Like, what's going on here? Let's just take it out in the yard, okay? All right. Well, then my other uncle comes around the corner with a shovel. So now at this point, I'm thinking, we're getting ready to bury this damn thing. It's an antique or whatever. I don't know what they're going to do with a shovel. So as we get there, my uncle says, all right, start pulling the drawers out and dump them in the yard. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Why are you dumping my grandmother's clothes in the yard? He says, because she said she saw a snake go in the drawer. I'm like, well, wait, hold on a minute. You mean to tell me I just carried this thing out in the yard and there might be a snake in there? He's like, well, if it's in a drawer, it ain't going to go nowhere. And I'm like, what? So here they go. They start pulling these drawers out and dumping the clothes out in the yard. lo and behold, this big old copperhead comes crawling out of the drawer of my grandma's pants. And, of course, my uncle cuts his head off with a shovel. And my grandma goes, "That's your payback for that time you made me faint." So it's kind of funny how things kind of, go full circle. So kind of what you see, what you sow is what you reap. My mother used to tell me that all the time. Whatever you do, you're going to get it back. So make sure everything you do is good. But during that time, that summer, it was pretty crazy times with the snakes and and everything else. Now, that wasn't the only summer that I had issues with snakes. I was probably 16, 17 years old. I was dating this girl, like my high school girlfriend. Her grandparents had bought a lake house at High Rock Lake. And so that summer, this probably would have been 1991, 92. But anyway, that summer, she and I spent a lot of time down there at her grandparents' lake house at High Rock Lake. She'd be swimming and I'd be fishing. That was just my thing. I'd gotten into fishing and was enjoying it. We'd at the time I worked for A&P, which is now out of business, but it was a grocery store. Of course, as this podcast progresses, I will have more A&P stories. But the cool thing about A&P, about having a job at A&P, was A&P, if you lived in Thomasville, North Carolina, A&P parking lot is where all the teenagers went cruising. Now, of course, cruising's kind of a thing of the past now. But in the 80s and 90s, you were cool if you cruised and hung out at the A&P parking lot. So me, being smarter, I got a job there at A&P, so I would get paid to hang out with my friends. Every time that they needed the buggies or the carts or whatever you call them, I call them buggies. But when it's time to bring the buggies in, I would volunteer to go out and get the buggies because then I'd go out there and hang out with my friends. But man, I got tons of stories from A&P, and I'll share those as the weeks go by. But A&P was a really cool place to work. So any listeners out there that are from Thomasville, A&P, I say the word, it brings back tons of memories. I'm sure a lot of people got their first kiss at A&P parking lot, got broken up with, met somebody. I mean, A&P was the place to be in the 80s and 90s. But anyway, we'd go to A&P and I would buy, shrimp or, something for bait. And then we'd drive down to High Rock Lake. Well, this one particular day, we're in High Rock Lake and she's out there swimming and I'm fishing by the pier. I'm right next to the pier, actually. And I wasn't really catching nothing, but I kept hearing a bunch of bubbles around. So I'm like, well, there's gotta be, there's something here. So let me walk out, out there fish. So I get about waist deep in water, cast my line. It comes back and I'm like, okay, this is good. So I'm like, there's got to be something out there, to catch. Well, she's, way out there, pretty good ways away from me swimming, and her and her sister, and I'm just fishing away. And all of a sudden I kept feeling something pop me in the leg. And I'm like, must be a fish. Gotta be a fish, right? Fish is in water. Well, I cast my line out again, and then I feel something go between my legs. And it's going between my legs, and it's going between my legs, and it's going between my legs. And I'm like, this is definitely not a fish. This is a damn snake. And so I yell to her, I won't say her name, but I call her, hey, get out of the water. I got a snake between my legs. And of course she says, you stupid pervert. No. Seriously, there is a snake between my legs and it's going towards you. You probably need to get out of the water. So the minute, and I'm standing still yelling at her, the minute I don't feel anything between my legs, I start backpedaling really fast and I get out of the water. She stays out there swimming. She could care less. She's like, you're stupid. You're just trying to be funny. No, really, I'm not. I'm telling you the truth. There was a snake between my legs in High Rock Lake. And so So anyway, I get out of the water. I get up on the pier. My heart rate's going pretty crazy at this point because I'm thinking that thing could have really bit me and put an end to my life. But I didn't know what kind of snake it was. But I'm assuming, any snake back then. I'm assuming any snake's deadly, right? So I get up in the water, or I'm sorry, the pier. I cast my line back out, and I happen to hear this big splash to the right about where I was at. I glance over, and probably one of the biggest, fattest snakeheads I've ever seen in my life. The sucker comes up out of the water. He was probably about as wide as 3 of my fingers. But head up out of the water, he looks over at me like he makes contact, like looking at me like, don't come back in here or I will bite you. And I yelled at her again. I'm like, you better get out of the water. I just saw this snake. He's right here and he's freaking huge. So this time they believed me and they got out of the water. And that was the last time that I got into the lake at High Rock Lake. Matter of fact, I think that's the last time I ever got in any lake, because at that point I'm at the point where if I can't see in there, I don't know what's in there, and chances are it's probably a snake. So I'm not gonna chance it. If I'm swimming, I'm going into a swimming pool. If I can't swim in a swimming pool, then guess what? I ain't getting in the water because I am not getting bit by a snake. Now, my last snake story on this week's podcast. As everyone knows, I got into pro wrestling shortly after this story with the snake with my ex-girlfriend. But years went by, and I'd been in wrestling for quite a while. I get the phone call from his promoter telling me, hey, I got this really, really cool thing I need you to do. I'm like, okay. And he's like, I'm going to have you work with Jake the Snake Roberts. And I'm like, oh, great. I love it. He's like, yeah. He said, well, you're not going to actually work a match with him. He's going to be working someone else, but that person doesn't want the snake put on him. So I thought, what better person to do it? I know would do it, would probably volunteer and do it for free, but I'm going to pay you. But it's you. And I said, oh yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Let's do it. I'm all about it. Now this day, or he called me like 2 weeks before, the date of this show. Like I knew this, I was booked on this show, but 2 weeks before the show, I found out I'm actually working with Jake Roberts. Now I'm excited. So now I got to really, 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 prepare myself. So I go back, for the next 2 weeks, I'm watching every match of Jake Roberts, bringing out the snake, putting the snake on people, all the stuff, and watching everything happen and get myself ready. So I was excited. I was ready to work with Jake the Snake Roberts. So the day of the show, I had my real job, which I was a collection manager for a local rent-to-own store, and I'd been working there for a while and everything like that. Well, the show was in Lexington. I lived in Thomasville. My job was in High Point. So anybody that's from that area it's 10, 15-minute drive and you're there. Well, the show was going to be at 7 o'clock. And I always like to get to a show an hour before showtime, sometimes 2 hours, depending upon what they got me doing and everything like that. Well, this particular day was the first time in my life. Now, I've experienced this 4 other times, but this is the first of what kidney stones were. Now, people that know me, I'm an avid. I love my Cheerwine. I love my Coke. I love my Pepsi. Maybe I should say Coca-Cola. I love my Coca-Cola. I love my Cheerwine. I love my Pepsi. I love soda. I mean, soda's my thing, right? Everyone has a habit. Some smoke, some dip, some drink alcohol. I drink soda. That's my hook. So anyway, this particular day, the assistant manager and I, we decided, hey, let's order pizza. So we get pizza. Now I think this show took place like February, March. So it wasn't really hot out yet, right? So we ordered pizza. We had pizza. I get done eating the pizza, and all of a sudden I don't feel good. Like I don't know. Like I don't know whether I want to stand or sit up. I go to the bathroom thinking I have to urinate. No, I don't have to urinate. I'm like, this is really weird. Like I feel like I got to pee so bad, but I can't pee. This is weird. Whatever. I go back to my office, start calling customers, and all of a sudden I start getting these pains in my back, and it's like somebody sticking a knife in me. So I told my manager, I was like, hey, man, I think I'm going to leave early. Now, they had already agreed to let me leave at 3 o'clock. Well, normally I leave at 6. They agreed to let me leave at 3. Now, this is 12. So in his mind, he's like, you ain't really sick. You're just making excuses because you want to leave early because you got this big wrestling match tonight. I'm like, no, seriously. Listen, I'm here to tell you right now, if this pain don't go away, I will not be at that wrestling match tonight. I can promise you that. And so anyway, I decide. So he lets me leave. I drive home. Now, I lived in Thomasville, working High Point. It's probably about a 15, 20-minute ride to my house where I lived at the time. And so I'm driving, and man, I'm having this excruciating pain in my lower back. And I'm like, this ain't good. I can't wrestle tonight if this is happening. And this may be my only time to ever work with Jake the Snake Roberts. It must be my nerves. I must be just nervous, and it's causing all this, But the closer I get to my house, I start sweating profusely. And I'm sweating bad, man. I'm sweating like crazy. My shirt's wet. So as I walk in the house, I'm stripping off my clothes. I strip down to my underwear, and I lay down on the floor in a fetal position, and I'm just in tears. And I tell my ex-girlfriend at the time, she's like, do you want me to call an ambulance for you? I'm like, yes, please, call him right now. So next thing you know, ambulance shows up, and lo and behold, my eyes are closed. I don't know who's there. Could care less who's there. I just need this pain in my crotch and in my back to go away because I can't take it anymore. And lo and behold, it's a lady paramedic, and she comes in and she sees me screaming. She sees me sweating. My clothes are laying all over the place. And she tells me, sir, have you been assaulted? What is wrong with you? Why are you sweating so bad? I don't know, I tell her. I have no clue. I just know that I'm in pain and I need you to help me. So she says, okay, let's take him to the hospital. So they put me on a gurney, whisk me out of my house. My ex-girlfriend leaves. She doesn't grab my pants. She doesn't grab my wallet. She just gets in the car and follows them to the hospital. Calls my parents, tells my parents, hey, don't know what's going on with Tony, but we're rushing him to the hospital. Get to the hospital, and they're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your pain? 30. Help me. I'm very, I don't do pain very well. So they get me in there, and they give me some painkiller, and now I say, hey, I think I got to go pee. And they go, well, okay. And of course they put the hospital gown on me and everything like that. And so anyway, I'm in there, and they do these x-rays. Doctor comes in. Now by this time, I'm starting to pass this kidney stone, which I had no idea what it was. And so the doctor comes to me and he says, okay, Mr. Tony, I believe you're going to be all right. What you had, sir, was a kidney stone. Do you drink soda? I said, all the time. Because then you need to stop because you're going to get them again. And every time you get them, they're worse than the first. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? He's like, yeah. And he goes, but I think you've passed it because you seem like you're doing much better. Now, at this time, my mom and dad are there. My ex-girlfriend's there. And somehow somebody had called the promoter, told him, hey, I don't know if Tony's going to make the show tonight because he's in the hospital. We don't know what's wrong with him. So, but I'm like, so I looked at the doctor. I said, hey, doc, I got a question for you. Now, this time it's probably about 4 o'clock. I said, I got a question for you. Because sure, what's your question? I said, listen, I feel good now. He said, okay. I said, so will I be okay to wrestle tonight? He said, what do you mean wrestle? Like you're a high school wrestler? No, sir. I'm a professional wrestler. What do you mean professional wrestler? I'm a professional wrestler, and I've got a match in about 2 hours. If you can get her and get me discharged so I can go home and get my gear, I can make the show. He says, I mean, I'm not going to tell you can't, but I ain't going to tell you can. I mean, whatever you feel you can do, But if I was you, I would go home and rest because, you've been through a lot here. I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to be through a lot more because you don't understand, sir. I'm wrestling Jake the Snake Roberts tonight. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I got to be there. He says, well, like I said, I'm not saying you can't, I'm not saying you can. I'm saying, I would rest, but it's up to you. I'm like, discharge me, buddy. I got to get out of here, and I need some pants. He goes, well, we don't have pants here, but you can keep this. Where's your clothes? I'm like, I don't know. They brought me here on an ambulance, and nobody grabbed my clothes from home, so I have none. He says, fine, we'll give you these little socks. So here I am wearing these stupid hospital socks, a hospital gown with no back in it, and luckily I did have underwear. And so they discharged me from the hospital. I tell my dad, I'm like, pull the car around to the back. And he goes, well, now they've redone the hospital. You got to go through the front. I'm like, oh, my God. So it's Saturday afternoon. There's all these weird people in the emergency room. So here I go walking out of the emergency room in a hospital gown, no pants, no shoes, only the stupid, goofy hospital socks. And anyway, get my dad's car, and he drives me home to my house. I go in, I take a quick shower, I pack my gear bag, I head to the arena. I get there, and the promoter's like, dude, what are you doing here? You are not wrestling. Oh, yes, I am. Listen, I'm good. I'm fine. I still had on my hospital bracelet on my hand. He goes, man, I can't let you wrestle knowing that you just came from the hospital. It don't matter. Listen, I just passed a kidney stone. I'm good. What if you take what if you get body slammed and something goes loose? I would not feel good about it. I'm like, listen, if that happens, it's on me. But I'm not missing this opportunity to work with Jake the Snake Roberts, okay? So he ends up putting me in a 6-man tag and tells me, don't do nothing. Well, of course, I get in there and I do most of the match. And he's like yelling at me because I'm wrestling against him and 2 other guys and me and my 2 guys. He's yelling, tag him out. No, I ain't ready to get out yet. And I just worked a full match. But before the match, let me get back to my story with Jake. I walk over and introduce myself to Jake. I say, hey, Jake, my name's Tony. We're working together tonight. And he tells me, hey, did you just get out of the nut house? And I said, what? He said, you didn't just get out of the nut house, did you? I said, why would you say that? Well, you got a hospital gimmick on. And I'm like, well, in the wrestling business, gimmick is, stuff that is a gimmick. If you want to know what a gimmick is, go listen to my Binge Buster show. But it's wrestling talk. He's like, you got your hospital gimmick on. And I'm like, well, yeah, I just got out of the hospital. Brother, what the hell are you doing here? Well, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to work with you, sir. And he's like, I have to commend you on that, but I also have to tell you, you're crazy. Of course, he used other words, and I won't use those. But he says, well, tell me about yourself, sir. Who trained you? And I said, well, I was trained by Jimmy Valiant. He goes, then we're going to do good tonight, kid, because I know what you're doing. I said, okay, sir, thank you. I said, so let me ask you a question. I said, any way I can see the snake? And he says, yeah, you sure can when we get out there. He laughed. He goes, actually, the snake hadn't even got here yet, so I don't know. Because, I guess at that point, he wasn't carrying a snake with him everywhere we went. He would rent snakes from people, local people, whatever. So now I'm really worried because now I'm thinking, okay, what kind of snake is it going to be? Is it going to be a cobra? Is it going to be a python? Is it going to be, I didn't know. So I go over to him and I said, Jake, I said, just 2 quick questions. What kind of snake is it and how big is it? He says, it's going to be a ball python and big enough to scare the shit out of you. And I said, okay, Jake, that's all I need to know. I don't need to know anymore. He started laughing. He said, I like you, kid. He said, I can tell that you were trained professionally. He says, we've been sitting here talking, several times. You have yet to ask me to take a picture with me, and I appreciate that. Not that I would say no. He says, but that lets me know that you are a professional, and I know that that you're not some mark in the wrestling business. A mark is a fan, basically, or a Mizark, which is a wrestler who really should be a fan, but somehow or another, some goof has let him get in the building. But anyway, he's like, don't worry, kid, don't worry. I'll take good care of you tonight. He goes, this is what we're doing. After I beat this guy, 1, 2, 3, you're going to run out. You're going to push him out of the ring, wipe your head, got rid of him, Turn around, I'll boot you, give you the DDT, and we'll put the snake on you, and we'll take it. Okay. Well, he lied. So we get out there, and I'm just thinking, okay, if he DDTs me, I'm going to be out anyway. So when he puts a snake on me, I won't even know. It'll be fine. So then I walked back over and I said, "Hey, Jake, so when you put the snake on me," I said, how do you want me to sell it? He said, "Don't worry, kid, you'll sell it." And he laughed. And then he gave me a hug. He says, "Don't worry, I promise you, you're going to be fine." I said, "No, I'm not worried. I just want to make sure I do it the way you want me to do it." He said, "I like to call everything out there, so whatever I call, that's what you do." Okay. He says, "Listen, you were trained by Jimmy. You've been doing this for a long time. Just do whatever you feel like in your heart you need to do." All right. So we get to the ring, and he beats the guy, and I roll him out of the ring, and I back up, and I'm like pointing, like, "Is that Jake behind me? Is that Snake behind me?" And I'm closing my eyes going, "Oh God." I turn around thinking that he's going to boot me and DDT me, but when I turn around, he puts a snake around my neck. And of course, my natural reaction was I flew the snake across the ring and got down on my knees and crawled out of the ring like a baby and get back to the dressing room. And I'm thinking, oh man, I just threw that snake across the ring. Jake's going to be, when he comes through that curtain, he's going to be mad at me. So he comes through the curtain. He's laughing. He says, "Kid, I love the way you sold it." He said, "In the 30 years I've been doing this, I've never had anybody throw my snake. That was pretty great." So I got over with Jake. So that was good. So that's my snake stories for this week's podcast. And I'm not sure. I don't believe I've had any other snake run-ins. Other than that one, I thought that one story with Jake Roberts would be the highlight of all the snake stories that I had over the years. I'm sure as the years went by, I've dealt with other snakes that wasn't snakes. They were human beings, but I guess we all have at some point in our lifetime. But I hope everyone has enjoyed this week's show talking about snakes, how snakes, we started out scaring my grandmother. I got scared back, and then I got the highlight. I got to wrestle with a snake. I got to wrestle with the world famous Jake the Snake Roberts. But I hope everyone is enjoying this podcast. We're just kind of getting it started. Each week I'm telling stories. I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks to have an actual guest that we can bounce off each other and tell each other stories. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe and you download it. The more downloads I get, the more popular it gets, and the more that I will want to keep doing it. Like I said, just show your support. I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone tuning in every week. And I will see you next week here on The Date is Fuzzy.
If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode.